Lurching into the future, bearing the mantle of Pink Floyd without Roger in 1987 was a tough one.
If the Floyd had broken up after Final Cut, the fans would have been disappointed but not surprised.
The band was fragmenting. In fact, it might be more correct to say splitting apart at the seams.
People grow as they get older and they change and they move in different directions.
The fact that he didn't really involve the others really showed his disinterest in keeping the group going.
It's trivial stuff, and it's a shame that stuff had to get to that level. But then we don't really know what was happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, it was a long, painful process which was trying to deprive me of my liberty to do what I wanted to do, and I don't really react terribly well to that.
I think Momentary Lapse was a fantastic rebirth of the band.
When this version of Pink Floyd gets going, it's like 80,000 seaters all over the world.
It went down so well, I'm pretty sure, because most of the public didn't really expect to ever see Pink Floyd playing anything.
Anyone who saw the band during that period would not deny it was certainly one of the best live performances by any band at any time.
I think the most important thing to say from my point of view about the Momentary Lapse tour was I had a wonderful time.
In my mind, the band was back together, and the chemistry was there again.
You're right to say that I was confident at the end and happy. Anyone would be happy and confident at the end when our moving forward and doing what we did, making the album, doing that tour, was justified.
So it was quite a huge, life-changing thing.
Final Cut was a real changing point for the band, and it was a closing period for the band as well. In my mind, the album's more of a solo piece for Roger Waters rather than anybody else.
It's Roger Waters' solo album, really, although the other members are playing on it. I mean, he does, the credits tell you very categorically that this is a Roger Waters work. And the fact that he didn't really involve the others really showed his disinterest in keeping the group going.
Rogers saw it as the final cut, that's the title, it's the end of Floyd, and he probably thought that's what was going to happen, but of course it wasn't what was going to happen.
The themes of the record, which is the central theme, which is really, the death of his father in World War II, was not unique at that point. I mean, there was a lot of discussion of war because it comes out around the time of the Falklands War, for example.
I think it was very much a piece of the time as well, because you had Britain going through a war, shortly prior to that. And I think it's interesting to look at it from a foreign perspective. When I heard the Final Cut, I wasn't in England, and we were looking at Britain in a different light. As a colony, we were looking at it in a different light. And in a way, I think Roger Waters captured some of that. The Not Now John track, where you've got the competition from the Japanese with the shipyards on the Tyne and so on. I think he had some valid things to say, but whether it was completely right for Pink Floyd, I think sort of remains to be seen.
The record is a distinct downer. It's actually hard work. There's no getting away from it. There is an appeal in Roger Waters' lyrics and in his almost maudlin vocals, but the overall feel of the record is very depressive.
I wouldn't say it's a drab album, but it's an album that's not going to make you particularly happy listening to it. It's completely on a downer. lyrically and musically.
They can appear to themselves every day. On closed circuit TV to make sure they're still real. It's the only connection.
The final cut has the kind of depths and troughs that really kind of characterize Pink Floyd's music. I mean, there are always those kind of slightly bombastic themes that also plunge into kind of an almost sort of, you know, Mandrax-like depression, really. So it's not very different from their other work in that respect. What is different is that Bob Ezrin, who had worked with the Pink Floyd certainly on The Wall and right back. He's an American keyboards player, but also arranger and production wizard. Had been dismissed from the camp because he had inadvertently told an American journalist that the finale of The Wall stage show would involve it basically being demolished. When this appeared in print, he was summarily fired, essentially. So he's replaced by Michael Kamen, who's capable, who's a great catalyst. He's one of those people who can bring everyone together. And his energy in the studio on Final Cut was very important. So you could imagine, I mean, if he's such an up figure, you could imagine it could have been a lot, even more down than it already is if he hadn't been there.
Everyone, are you having a nice time? Now the final solution can be applied.
Pink Floyd never toured with the Final Cut. Really, because I think no one wanted to tour. Particularly Roger Waters didn't want to tour. He really seemed to want to get out of the whole thing at that point.
I guess the reason they didn't tour with the Final Cut was that the band weren't particularly enamoured with it in the first place. You know, the band was fragmenting. In fact, it might be more correct to say splitting apart at the seams. It was highly unlikely they were going to sustain a tour.
I suppose for me, probably the making of the Final Cut was the most difficult. I think by then there was very much a feeling that we were really hardly a band anymore, that the sum was no longer greater than the parts, that we weren't achieving anything like our potential. But the thing became, I think it became a sort of an arena for all the problems of Roger feeling that really he wanted to either leave the band or run it his way. And the material became, it sort of drifted actually. I think it probably drifted away from one idea and then became a sort of new concept and a new story. And that happened halfway through, and instead of perhaps ditching it, which is perhaps what we should have done, or rethinking it, we didn't even really have the sort of mechanism set up anymore as a band to be able to sort of sit and talk rationally about it. It would have simply been another opportunity for a fight. I suppose I saw that album as the beginning of the end.
None of them had made any money from The Wall. The Wall had been such an expensive production. The only person, ironically, who made any money was Rick Wright, the original keyboards player, who had been involved in the production of The Wall, or wanted to be involved in the production of The Wall, but allegedly was not very active in that role, and Roger Waters had demanded that he be fired from the group. Then they realised that they haven't got anyone to play keyboards on stage, so they get him back in on a wage. So in fact, he is actually the only member of Pink Floyd to make any money out of The Wall. But it seems really the reason they don't tour is because I think it's as though it's all hit a nosedive at that point, and it's as though the sound of the album is very symbolic. You know, this downer feel about it is very symbolic, as though actually no one wants to be involved in it anymore.
Floating down through the clouds, memories come rushing up to meet me now. But in the space between the heavens and the corner of some foreign field, I had a dream. I had a dream.
On the final cut, you've got Waters, Gilmour and Mason, and then in little letters, the credit is for Rick Wright. I mean, what's with that? Come on, guys, get a life. In a way, it's a shame that Mason and Gilmour didn't stand up and go, come on, he's a band member. He always has been. He always will be. So for me, as an outsider looking in, I think it's trivial stuff, and it's a shame that stuff had to get to that level. But then we don't really know what was happening behind the scenes.
As the teardrops rise to meet the comfort of the band, you take her frail hand and hold on to the dream.
Critics and fans were quite surprised that the final cut hung together so well as an album, because they'd heard through the grapevine, so to speak, the sort of infighting and the problems that the band were having.
Well, if you look at something, you know, a piece of music like The Wall, you're hardly going to better that. So everything's going to be downhill from there, no matter what you try, at least for a short period of time. So when you bring something out like the final cut, I think you've got to look at it in that context. And I think it's on record as going down that a lot of the pieces were leftover pieces from The Wall, which is where Dave Gilmour got a little upset with things.
The estrangement that Roger Waters had with the other three members of Pink Floyd after the 1982 album The Final Cut goes back to The Wall movie, according to Pink Floyd singer, songwriter, guitarist David Gilmour.
The arguments and fights that myself and Roger had during the latter half of making the album were pretty intense on certain things. We had some real major scraps on certain things, and that left our relationship a bit more damaged at the end of that album. And again in the film, there were one or two things that happened during the film that I felt that I absolutely had to do, that I know Roger's never forgiven me for, on outvoting him and telling him that he had to stay in line on certain things, which are very sort of hard to explain. But when you've got millions of dollars invested in a project, there are certain protections that you have to stick to, that I felt I had to stick to. And so I was the only one around who could actually take on the role of overruling him and telling him that there were certain things that he couldn't do. And I think that's sort of, that period our relationship probably became irreparably damaged, and remained that way through the Final Cut album, which was torture.
It just goes to show what it must have been like in the recording sessions. I get the feeling that a lot of the time they weren't all there together.
Through the fish-eyed lens of tear-stained eyes, I can barely define the shape of this moment in time. And far from flying high in clear blue skies, I'm spiraling down to the hole in the ground where I hide.
A significant aspect of the final cut is that Pink Floyd no longer use hypnosis to design the cover. Instead, Roger Waters decides that he will design the cover himself, thereby almost proving that it's just a Roger Waters solo album.
If you look at it in a retrospective basis, it's not bad. It's not brilliant, but it's not bad for the concept that Roger Waters was obviously trying to deal with. You know, with it being such a dark album, because it is clearly a dark album, then the cover works.
You wouldn't really know this unless it was explained to you, but the cover is it includes a sort of medal ribbon and you know, a fragment of a poppy in a corner of the sleeve. And but I always thought, until I understood that it was part of a medal, I always thought it looked like a bit of African fabric. It looks like one of those records that's kind of an early world beat album. But it kind of really did define the extent to which the record was being removed from the rest of the group.
Then the phone rang. I never had the nerve to make the final cut.
The final cut's certainly not a brilliant album. It's brilliantly played, brilliantly executed, but it does lack the feel of things, for instance, like Dark Side of the Moon and to a lot of people, of course, The Wall, and so on. But I think the album stood the test of time extremely well when you listen to it today. I think it's a more valid piece today because it is a historical document of the time, not just of Roger Waters, you know, creating a testimony to his father, but it's actually a sign of the times in the 80s, for which most of us we can remember quite well.
It's very interesting that the final cut, which is Roger Waters' last record with the Pink Floyd, had been about his father, his deceased father, because similarly, in Roger Waters' role in the Pink Floyd, he'd been a pretty patriarchal figure. He had been kind of as though he was trying to control everyone and tell everyone what to do. He's absolutely shocked when he learns that the other two members, as they then were, Dave Gilmour and Nick Mason, intend to carry on with the group's name. But he only learns this when he essentially issues them with legal papers saying that the group is to be disbanded and the name is to exist no more.
We hadn't been served any actual writs or anything. Nothing had been actually done in a court against us. There were papers served against us, which are for a 2 or 3 court issues, but nothing like an injunction or anything, or an attachment or anything that can actually prevent you from doing anything had been even attempted, and still hasn't to this day been attempted, because to attempt to do that sort of thing you have to be fairly convinced you're going to get it. Nothing has yet been done that actually stops us from working, or has even been attempted to stop us from working. Things have been done which Roger hopes will prevent us from working eventually when they come to court, which of course they won't, but I mean, he thinks they will.
Fortunes are spent on this legal battle, but eventually there's an out-of-court settlement, and you know, they carry on. Nick Mason and Dave Gilmour carry on with Pink Floyd's name, but you know, Roger Waters is always absolutely dismissive of everything that they do.
People grow as they get older, and they change and they move in different directions. And the other guys in the band and myself have moved off in separate directions, and I doubt very much if our paths will converge in the future.
Lurching into the future, bearing the mantle of Pink Floyd without Roger in 1987 was a tough one. It's as anyone can imagine. It's a big, tough mantle to stick on my poor shoulders and trudge forward into the future with.
I think Momentary Lapse of Reason was a fantastic rebirth of the band.
Oh, Momentary Lapse of Reason certainly did breathe new life into the group. I mean, it got them up and running again on actually a much larger scale than previously.
I bought it, went out, listened to it, and didn't stop listening to it for a long time.
Momentary Lapse of Reason was unexpected in the sense that if the Floyd had broken up after Final Cut, their fans would have been disappointed but not surprised.
During the period of our sort of disintegration with Roger and Roger's leaving, I certainly was consistent, I would think, in saying that I intended to carry on and do it again, whatever happened, with or without Roger. The intention was always to have a go at it, and at some point in '86 I started sort of gathering demos together and seeing what we could get, and Nick came down and Bob Ezrin came over, and we started working away in the studio in I think the beginning of October of '86, to the end of seeing whether we thought we could put a Pink Floyd record together. There was a time there when we hadn't actually said to anyone else or anyone that that's what we were doing, and there was always the possibility of demoting it to a third solo album for me, if you like, if it didn't start really coming together. But the intention was to make it a Pink Floyd record, and it took a while, took really till past that Christmas before we were really certain, into the beginning of '87, before we were convinced that that's what we were going to do, and we were happy with what was going on.
Well, interestingly, after the war, people wondered what was going to happen with Pink Floyd. So when the Final Cut came out, I think the hardcore fans were just happy to get something. When they sat down and listened to it, then the criticism came out. And I think that was equally so with Momentary Lapse of Reason. People who liked the band just wanted to hear anything. And as it happened, it was an extremely good anything.
It sold really well. So it meant that the Floyd fans still wanted to buy the Floyd records, even though Roger Waters wasn't there anymore. They could make good records without having that other element in the band.
Into the distance, a river of black, stretched to the point of no turning back. I fly to the fancy on the windswept field, standing alone, my senses reel. Fatal attraction is holding me fast. How can I escape this irresistible grasp? Can't keep my eyes from the southern sky. Tongue tied and twisted, just an earthbound misfit high.
The group that makes Momentary Lapse of Reason is really Dave Gilmour, the guitarist, and Nick Mason, the drummer. And even Nick Mason, who's been rather more involved in motor racing and learning how to fly planes, isn't very involved. So it's really Dave Gilmour who's the driving force. Rick Wright is brought back, but because of some complex clause in the contract when he left Pink Floyd, he is not allowed to be stated to be a member. And they bring in loads of other session musicians.
For me, because of that, the chemistry of people that have known each other for 25 years and know exactly how people work best and how they don't work best, that bit of chemistry is lacking in this record, I think.
Well, a hell of a lot of session musicians were used on Momentary Lapse of Reason. But is that wrong? I don't think it is. You're dealing with a band that is known for performing epic pieces, and if they want to use session musicians to improve or enhance that, that's nothing new in the business. That's been done forever. Ever since Presley started doing his thing, you brought session musicians in. So no, I don't think it's detracted from it. Some could argue that it's a Gilmour solo album with a few Pink Floyd members, and that probably wouldn't be a bad thing to say. but it's a damn good solo album if that's the case.
I think it was a sort of well, it's obviously made very much in the Pink Floyd style, but I think really it was a sort of a transition for David, who was very much at the helm of particularly at that point of doing it. It was a kind of solo album. I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying so, really, in a way, but obviously including the other guys in the band. But because there'd been, I don't know, 7-8 years, whatever, had elapsed since they'd done anything, it was kind of very much kind of a fresh take on the Floyd thing. So although it encompassed a lot of traditional sort of Floydian musical styles, if you like, it also was much more a vehicle for David's voice and musical ideas. I think it was much more melodic.
There were things missing because we missed Roger. There's no question of it. I've said it 1,000 times before, and I think even Dave would say it as much as he's angry with Roger for all the things Roger has suggested in the press and for the disrespect Roger showed him in the last few years. We missed his artistic sensibilities and even some of the rub.
Gilmour had been spurred on to do it because Roger Waters had said to him, "Oh, you'll never manage it. You'll never manage to do it." But in a way, it sort of sounds Pink Floyd light, which is kind of why probably it was really successful.
The production team on Momentary Lapse of Reason was Bob Ezrin, absolutely superb.
Bob Ezrin is brought back for Momentary Lapse of Reason. Obviously, Roger Waters is no longer around, so there's no problems. And he's a proven commodity. It's been proven he works.
You only have to listen to the things that he'd done, years before with people like Alice Cooper. And funnily enough, if you listen to things like Billion Dollar Babies, you can actually hear some of the aspects of that coming out in the production, albeit with more modern technology. Yeah, he's almost second to none as a producer anyway. And I think the results speak for themselves.
It took about 9 months altogether, and naturally, in a sort of typical Pink Floyd manner, it's not done in a studio, but it's done on a boat on the Thames that's been converted into a studio.
We had a sensitive and mystical, magical kind of time making the record. We did it on this magnificent boat on the Thames River, the 100-foot-long houseboat.
A floating recording studio. Why a houseboat? What?
There's no real reason. It was an accident. I spotted this place. I saw it when it came up for sale, and I didn't really have a plan for it. I didn't even think about it as a recording studio at the time. It wasn't expensive, and it was a very beautiful little thing. So,
what body of water is it on?
It's on the Thames River near London.
It must be very picturesque. Nice place to go to work and spend
It's beautiful, yes. It's an unusual recording studio. It's covered in windows everywhere, and all you can see are ducks and geese and swans and stuff swimming around outside.
Watching the geese fly down the river and the sunset on the Thames, and even during the winter, the snowfall on the grass and so on was so magical. It was such a beautiful, hidden away, removed place, and I think that the atmosphere of the place seeped into the record.
Momentary Lapse of Reason's album cover, which features, I think it's 600 empty beds on a Devon beach, is really a very good example of the new corporate Pink Floyd that emerges with Momentary Lapse of Reason.
If you look back at Pink Floyd's catalogue, it's one of the more memorable covers people may not remember the title of the album, but they're certainly going to look at the image and go, oh yeah, Pink Floyd.
Hypnosis and Storm Thorgerson are brought back to do that sleeve. And it looks like an archetypal Pink Floyd sleeve, but like a parody of one, really. I mean, it's so excessive. How much that sleeve must have cost, the mind boggles.
I think it's a fantastic album cover. And when you bear in mind that this was done in the days when computer graphics were in its infancy, that must have been quite a hoot to have been on the beach with all those beds. And yeah, very good.
One step down the hole we walk.
Momentary Lapse of Reason, beautifully recorded, wonderful songs, and I think the only people that say that it's a bad album are the ones who defend Roger Waters not being in the band. It was clearly a turning point for the band and the start of a whole new season of recordings, mostly live, but nonetheless it was really the start of the new band.
They toured it because when it came out it was really quite successful, and when they toured it, in my mind the band was back together. And the chemistry was there again.
Well, Momentary Lapse of Reason played live, or the songs that were played live, was superb. And I think anyone who saw the band during that period would not deny it was certainly one of the best live performances by any band at any time.
All the brokenness of the problems from the final cut and the band breaking up essentially, and the name problems were solved, and they're back on track, and this is what we're going to do, and we've decided this is what we're going to do. They made a commitment to it, and it shows, and they're having fun. And some people would say now they're having fun because Roger's not there anymore. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not in the band. I can't really make a judgment on that, but they're certainly back to a feeling of confidence in what they're doing, and this is what they do best, and they're out there doing it.
I think the most important thing to say from my point of view about the Momentary Lapse tour was I had a wonderful time. The thing that we got from that was to go out and work long and hard enough to actually develop something to the point where you could say it's right. All the touring we ever did through all the 70s and 80s, we never ever did enough. So the shows were always half developed. We could never put, with the exception of The Wall, where because it was to be filmed, we were able really to throw everything at it and do it properly. But we still never played it as well as we would have done if we'd done it for, let's say, at least 3 months.
Mr. Tim Rennie is an excellent all-round guitar player. I first heard him with the Sutherland Brothers and Quiver on a track called Lying in the Arms of Mary, and he played a guitar solo, and I went, wow, what is that? That's fantastic. And then I was lucky enough to meet him over the years and played on a couple of records with him. He's doubled up as Dave Gilmour's second guitar player for many years. And he's an excellent gentleman as well.
I was attracted by the whole kind of throwaway 2.5-minute pop song kind of idea, really, and I suppose like thousands of millions of other kids got very, very inspired by the Beatles and the Stones and early bands like that, as well as the sort of R&B boom, and even things like I remember going and seeing local bands playing Shadow covers numbers and thinking, that's rather good, Quite liked all that. So. Yeah, I think the guitar attracted me, particularly the electric guitar, because of the whole sort of effect thing, the ability to get quite an enormous sound out of a very sort of small, simple instrument, really. I was brought up in Cambridge, and so I happened by chance to go on to the same school as Sid Barrett and Roger Waters, in fact, and Storm Thorgerson as well, the county high school for boys in Cambridge. So I sort of had a pretty good, you know, well, I knew about them and followed the Floyd's career right from the very start. And David Gilmour was, although not a sort of close friend of mine, I was quite aware of him, and he was a bit of a hero at that stage. So I followed their careers and sort of kept in touch with David over the years, and also, by chance, got asked to do Roger Waters' first solo tour, The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. So I'd done that, and I suppose that kind of put me in a bit of a, you know, kind of, who should we get to play rhythm guitar? He seems to be all right, you know. So I eventually got a call to do that, much to my surprise. I think David rang me personally to start with. That was the very first sort of introduction to it, just to see, you know, whether I'd like to be involved. And obviously, you know, it sounds like a fantastic idea. And initially, it was, I believe, planned to just go out for a number of weeks just in America. And they weren't really quite sure how it was going to all go, but it very quickly became apparent that there was a lot of demand for it. So it changed from a kind of a few weeks in America to what ended up as 16 months all around the world twice, basically. So it turned into quite a huge, life-changing thing.
No cause, we don't discriminate. Discovery is to beat its own. Currency is flesh and bone. Head open up and put on sale. Gather round and haggle. The hard cash will lie in the sea. Even our masters don't know the ways we lead. One word is a battleground. One word, we will smash it down. One word.
It's essentially an 11-piece band, with 3 girl singers. We had various different sax players. The first main tour, it was a guy called Scott Page, who had previously played with Supertramp. He was a bit of a showman, nice guy from LA. John Carrin on sort of second keyboards, Guy Pratt on bass, and myself really. That was that, and plus the original members of the orchestra. Also, I forgot to mention Gary Wallace on percussion. It's a very important part of the whole presentation. But yeah, no, there was great sort of camaraderie within the band. We all got on instantly very well. But it was very good, very, very friendly balance of people, you know. During that first tour, the Momentary Lapse of Reason tour, Roger was touring as well. Within a couple of weeks of us, he'd either be in areas where we were playing 2 weeks before or 2 weeks later. And on one occasion we went to, I can't remember where it was, but a whole bunch of us went to see him, to see his performance just out of interest. We sort of snuck in, giggling, in heavy disguise. So that was quite fun.
One sound, one single sound. One kiss, one single kiss. Face outside the window pane. However did come to this? Man who ran, child who cried, girl who heard, a voice that lied, sun that burned, fiery red, the vision of an empty bed.
At the beginning of the tour, we performed the new numbers from the Momentary Lapse of Reason, and it hadn't really been released. In fact, I think when we started, I think the album, I don't know that it was actually released. I think we played the first few gigs when the album wasn't actually out. So it was playing, you know, people just didn't recognise this stuff at all. I mean, given that, the response was fantastic, really.
By and large, they inserted the majority of Momentary Lapse of Reason into the middle of their concert. Started off with a number or two and then romped off into the album. I think it worked well. thoroughly enjoyable concerts.
No more turning away from the weak and the weary. No more turning away from the coldness inside. Just a world that we all must share. Dying up just to stand and stare. Is it only a dream that there'll be no more turning away?
If you read Nick Mason's book, all of it seems to be, the gigs seem to be mere incidentals to visits to, vintage aeroplane aerodromes.
We did some gigs, and we did Modena because it was near the Ferrari factory, so all the Ferrari guys came along to that. And there was a few gigs that were put on definitely because of the, proximity to drivers and the like. So yeah, mad keen on his cars.
There's a telling moment about what life was like on the road with them, told by Guy Pratt, and he tells a story of how, we're in the 747. Oh, Nick Mason's going to take the controls. Oh, everyone run up and down the aisle as fast as you can, jumping up and down so he'll think we've hit turbulence. So I think that's a very good indication of life on the road with this Pink Floyd Mark III.
So you think you can tell heaven from hell, blue skies from pain? Can you tell a green field from a cold steel rail? A smile from a veil. Do you think you can tell? Did they get you to trade your heroes for ghosts, hot ashes for trees, hot air for a cool breeze, cold cup of shade? Did you exchange walk on par in the wall for a lead role in a cave?
One of the interesting things about their sets, of course, is that whereas Pink Floyd previously would never play old material, it's always kind of the latest stuff, exemplified by The Wall, for example. This is a greatest hits show. So you get another brick in the wall, you get, Wish You Were Here, you get Great Gig in the Sky. And it's all very listener, audience friendly.
We basically tried to keep it to numbers, obviously, that David was more associated with, and that sang and contributed to the writing of. So that sort of narrowed it down a fair bit.
What they've managed to do is pick the cream of the crop from their back catalogue that they know works live, and they know that when you pay your X amount of pounds or dollars to see the show, you expect to hear that. And in fact, I've been in many situations with artists, and you look at the set list, and if you see an artist who hasn't put into their set list the songs that the audience expects, you think, we've got a bit of a war on our hands here, because people, when they pay their hard-earned money, they want to hear the favourites. They haven't come to hear just your new album.
As far as performing on stage, I think Comfortably Numb and Run Like Hell were pretty much, said it all in terms of, rock, stadium rock. It was just amazing to be a sort of small part of that, really, with all its pyrotechnics and full-on over-the-top effects, When we were going through the rehearsal stage, I was told there was in excess of 60 computers all running at the same time, controlling various different things. I think it was more the special effects, coordinating the lighting and lasers and that sort of thing, the technical side of it, really. There was always a slight, there was a feeling of being on the edge of a cliff a bit should something goes a bit wrong,
Their shows have developed into spectaculars. Fantastic lights. I mean, people talk about, when they go and see the Pink Floyd, about the show, the light show and the screens and the use of screens. And lots of other bands have taken from that idea, and they were really the forerunners of that.
Throughout the whole Floyd career, the whole production side of things, the staging, the lights, the effects and everything, were becoming an established trademark. And they were sort of expected to top each one, I think. So, everything, more and more money going into research and development all the time, and coming up with lots and lots of, in some cases, very wacky ideas, things to do. So yes, I know there was several £1 million worth of investment before the tour started, and I think they were initially a bit worried that they may not actually make their money back. But I'm sure there was an element of David being determined to show everyone that they could do it without Roger. I'm sure that must have been a bit of a driving force then.
One of the sticking points between Dave Gilmour, Nick Mason and Roger Waters have been Roger Waters' huge reluctance to play stadiums where you can really coin it in. I mean, which, you have to kind of take your hat off to him for that. He is purist, but he had his reasons for being purist about this. When this version of Pink Floyd gets going, it's like 80,000 seaters all over the world. Huge amounts of money are being coined in.
By the end of the long Momentary Lapse 1987-88 Pink Floyd tour, over 5 million copies of A Momentary Lapse of Reason were sold, and the Pink Floyd tour had gone from multiple nights in arenas to multiple nights in stadiums, breaking the $1 million per concert barrier, something unimaginable only 10 years earlier. Pink Floyd played to more than 10 million fans in 15 different countries. When I congratulated David Gilmour on their success, he appeared confident and self-satisfied.
Too self-satisfied, maybe.
Well,
maybe too self-satisfied.
Why do you say that? Isn't success the best revenge?
Yes, I mean, I don't know how interested I am in revenge. You're right to say that I was confident at the end and happy. Anyone would be happy and confident at the end when our moving forward and doing what we did, making the album, doing that tour, was justified. One can consider the merits of everyone's case in these things, but I don't think there's many people that wouldn't have thought at that point that we had every right to continue doing what we were doing.
Any sense of permanently quieting any detractors who questioned the authenticity of a Pink Floyd project like Momentary Lapse?
Success doesn't actually alleviate criticism. Unfortunately, there is no direct. That would be a wonderful thing if criticism was cancelled out by success. Unfortunately, that is not the case. I think, however successful you are, however long you've been doing it, most performers actually can be cut to the quick by criticism, and can quite often, I think critics sometimes underestimate how hurtful and how easily they can actually cut through. The reason we're all up there is this desperate desire to show off and please people and perform.
We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control. No dark sarcasm in the classroom. Teachers leave them kids alone.
Well, I mean, if you want to summarise what the concerts were like for Momentary Lapse, A Reason tour, they were really good. It's the best period for Pink Floyd live that I have ever seen.
It went down so well, I'm pretty sure, because most of the public didn't really expect to ever see Pink Floyd playing anything. So it was kind of a, you know, from out of nowhere comes, oh, this band we didn't think we'd ever see. And in the past, they'd been very, very difficult to catch live. So suddenly it became kind of available, you know, in your town, you know. And particularly in America, I mean, the response was fantastic before playing a note, you know. A great deal of excitement and anticipation and stuff going on.
People seem to be very satisfied with it, but it also was symbolic of the, you know, of the corporate nature of this Pink Floyd brand, because you felt it was really, it was more about the idea of going to a Pink Floyd concert, like all those stadium acts are really, you know, it's kind of, it's the event rather than what's being seen or what's being heard at all. So they just become that, they just become a marketing entity.
Monday, get away. Get the job with more than you're okay. Monday, it's a guess. Grab that cash with both hands and make a set. New car, caviar, four-star daydream. Think about me, a football team.
The Venice gig is surrounded by mythology. The concert is intended to raise money for the Venice Restoration Fund, because Venice, as we know, is falling into the water.
There was a lot of problems with the organisation of it, and it was dealing with the very kind of unreliable local authorities. Not to say mafia, I'm not quite sure. It's a very fine line, really.
Every move that the group makes is blighted by the mafia, who want money for everything. And for example, you know, the guys who run the gondolier taxis in Venice, they'd said that if they didn't get, you know, their big payoffs, which was like a lot, like 10,000 each, they're going to sound their horns outside the concert throughout the concert. But actually the group couldn't care less about that. They totally had it because they knew it's like enormously loud by that point that, you know, no one will be able to hear these guys.
There was all kinds of bungs and threats and promises, and then promises with being withdrawn, and, you know, all kinds of, you know, everybody that could seemingly make a buck out of it was, you know, including the gondoliers, much to my horror. And there was a tremendous, well, I don't know, it was most entertaining, this situation where there'd been this VIP sort of pontoon drawn up with all these sort of celebrities and, you know, of all sorts, which was towed into position about 50 yards in front of the stage as a prime position, which was immediately bottled and canned by all the punters that got anywhere nearby. And, you know, it was all, I mean, it was very, very, very hairy. Just before we started playing, because it was a live broadcast that went out on the BBC, sort of one-off in-concert type thing, and all the lights on the waterfront went off just as we were about to start. It was like, you know, this is another attempt at, and the fact that we actually got through it, the show without the power being turned off, is quite extraordinary. I mean, we were expecting that to happen. You know. And I think also the authorities tried to block the lagoon to stop the staging from being removed after the show, because they were demanding more money for the, you know, so it was quite extraordinary. I mean, there's all kinds of, you know, devious goings on. It's quite extraordinary.
Taking away the moments that make up a dull day. You fritter and waste the hours in an off-hand way. Kicking around on a piece of ground in your hometown. Waiting for someone or something to show you the way.
Afterwards, they threatened to sue the band because they said certain elements of stonework were damaged on the waterfront by the high decibel volume. I mean, it's just extraordinary. It's just everyone wanted a piece of it, you know.
The amount of people that came from all over Europe to see Pink Floyd created far more havoc and destruction to Venice than anything that the money that they brought to the charity would have prevented.
One rather disturbing thing was, I remember walking around Venice the following day. There was a diamond screen was put up in St Mark's Square. For a lot of the people obviously couldn't actually get a direct view of the performance, and the idea was that they'd all sit in St Mark's Square. And apparently just before we started performing, the police, the sort of riot police, cleared the square, so baton charged St Mark's Square and just drove all these people out. And so not only did they not get to see the show, but they, you could see there's piles of like rucksacks and people's clothing and stuff on the sides of St Mark's Square all around, where people had just been forced to just run off. So of course we were completely unaware of that at the time. We couldn't see it, and so that was a bit upsetting. Just the rubbish and obviously sort of detritus that people had left there. So that was a bit of a shame.
What kind of person returned home after the extended Momentary Lapse world tour and its dizzying success?
Well, a sort of a schizophrenic person, I think, is the person that returned from all that. I was very happy with our success, very happy with what we had achieved professionally during that time, but I was going through a very, very bad stage in my personal life, which wound up in a divorce and all that sort of stuff that one goes through. So it was, like I said, it was very schizophrenic. I was sort of very happy professionally, very unhappy personally, and so I was kind of messed up, I think, at the end of it all.
I think Gilmour has still got it in him to do an absolutely classic Pink Floyd album, with or without Roger Waters. He had Momentary Lapse of Reason, great rebirth of the band. And to me, it doesn't matter whether he had other musicians, whether he had other writers. He had certainly captured so much of the Pink Floyd feel and Pink Floyd sound. Anything else didn't matter. And I think there's another album there. It'd be nice to see them work together again as well, because no one can deny the influence that Roger Waters has had on Pink Floyd is phenomenal. But of course the machine carries on and has proven that it can carry on without him. I think for most fans it would be nice for them to see another project with him in the frame again, as long as it's not a doom-laden, turgid piece. He needs to come up with something that really is a sign of the times. So maybe it will be a doom-laden piece.